The flashing blue and red lights painted my living room walls in a silent, rhythmic dance. I stood by the window, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee I had no intention of drinking, and watched as two officers approached my neighbor's front door. Mr. Henderson, a man whose entire personality consisted of a perpetual scowl and a collection of lawn gnomes, opened the door with a triumphant smirk. Before the officers could even speak, he jabbed a fat finger in the direction of my house. "It's about time," he barked, his voice carrying across the manicured lawns. "The noise from that place is unbearable. Last night was the last straw." The taller of the two officers didn't even glance my way. He looked down at his notepad, then back at Mr. Henderson, his expression unreadable. "Sir, are you Mr. Gerald Henderson?" "Of course I am. I'm the one who called. And you filed a noise complaint against this residence." The officer gestured vaguely toward my house. "At approximately 11:45 p.m. last night?" "Yes. Sounded like a construction site over there, banging and crashing. Woke up my wife. It's gotta stop." Mr. Henderson puffed out his chest, the righteous victim. The officer nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "That's interesting, sir, because we have a slight problem with your statement." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "We have security footage showing your vehicle 2 towns over at 11:45 p.m., specifically in the parking lot of a warehouse that was reported broken into this morning." Mr. Henderson's face went from ruddy to a pasty white. His jaw went slack. He thought his petty harassment campaign, funded by my mother, was just about making my life a living hell. He had no idea he was about to become the star witness in my brother's felony investigation. You might be wondering why my own mother would pay my neighbor to file false police reports against me. To understand how we got to this point, where I'm using a man's greed to dismantle my own family, you have to go back to the beginning, back to the inheritance my grandfather left me, and the lie my parents told me to steal it. My grandfather was the only person who ever really saw me. While my parents were busy polishing my older brother Kevin's trophies, my grandfather was the one who taught me how to read a stock ticker, how to change the oil in a car, and how to look a person in the eye when I shook their hand. He used to say, "The world will give you nothing, so you better learn how to build things for yourself." He passed away a few months before I turned 18, and in his will, he left me a trust fund worth $100,000. It was my escape route, my ticket to college, my chance to finally build something of my own. My family, however, saw it differently. They saw it as a solution to their favorite problem, my brother, Kevin. Kevin was the golden child, the sun around which our entire family orbited. He was charismatic, handsome, and utterly useless. While I worked part-time jobs through high school to save for a car, my parents bought him a brand new Mustang for his 16th birthday. When I was grounded for a month for getting an A- in calculus, Kevin was celebrated for simply not failing his classes. His dreams were treated as prophetic visions, while my ambitions were dismissed as cute little hobbies. He was destined for greatness. I was destined to help him get there. The night of my 18th birthday wasn't a celebration. It was an intervention. My mom, dad, and Kevin sat me down at the dining room table, their faces grim and serious. My mother placed her hand over mine. "We need to talk about Grandpa's gift," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "You know how much Kevin has been working on his new business idea. It's a sure thing. A real game changer." I knew all about it. Some vague app idea he'd dreamed up that was going to revolutionize the social media landscape. He didn't have a business plan or any experience, just a whole lot of confidence my parents had paid for. "He needs seed money," my father chimed in, "and we think the best use for your inheritance is to invest it in your brother. It's an investment in the whole family's future." They weren't asking. They were telling me. They told me I could just take out student loans for college. They told me this was what my grandfather, a man who valued hard work above all else, would have wanted. They told me not to be selfish. What could I do? I was 18. sitting at a table with the three people who were supposed to protect me, and they were all looking at me as if I were a dragon guarding a treasure they were entitled to. To refuse would be to declare war on my entire world. They had cornered me, using words like family, future, and love as weapons. So I signed the papers. I watched as the money my grandfather had left for me, my one chance at a life I chose, was legally transferred into a joint account in my brother's and my father's names. My mother hugged me afterward, whispering, "You've done the right thing. You'll see." The revolutionary app never materialized. Not a single line of code was ever written. Instead, Kevin's business expenses began with a down payment on a flashy new sports car. Then came the trips to Miami and Las Vegas, all meticulously documented on his social media. He was living the life of a tech mogul before he'd even created a product, hosting lavish parties and buying rounds of drinks for his ever-growing circle of sycophantic friends. He became a minor local celebrity, the boy wonder with the big ideas and even bigger bank account. Meanwhile, my life became a blur of exhaustion. I couldn't afford the university I'd dreamed of, so I enrolled in community college. I worked double shifts, 40 hours a week, splitting my time between waiting tables at a greasy spoon diner and stocking shelves at a bookstore. I'd get home late, my feet aching and my clothes smelling like fried onions, and study until my eyes couldn't stay open. Whenever I saw my family, they'd ask me why I looked so tired and stressed. "You need to be more positive," my mother would say, completely straight-faced. "All this negativity isn't good for you. Look at your brother, he's so full of life." The final straw came about a year later. It was a Saturday night, and the diner was packed. I was rushing between tables, balancing plates and refilling coffees, when the door opened and Kevin walked in. He was with a group of his new, wealthy friends, all of them laughing loudly. He saw me, and for a split second, a flicker of something, maybe shame, crossed his face. But it vanished instantly. He didn't acknowledge me. He sat his friends down in my section and snapped his fingers to get my attention. "Hey you, we need menus." That was it. I wasn't his sister. I was just you. The girl slinging hash for pocket money while he spent my future on impressing people who wouldn't remember his name a year from now. That night, I went home, packed one suitcase, and left without a note. The first few months were the hardest. I drove 3 states away with less than $1,000 to my name, sleeping in my beat-up car in Walmart parking lots, and living off gas station coffee and instant noodles. Every night, the loneliness was a physical weight, but it was still better than the suffocation I felt back home. The humiliation of that last night in the diner burned in my mind. It was a constant reminder that to them, I was not family. I was a resource to be used and an inconvenience to be ignored. One morning, sitting in my car watching the sun rise, I realized something. My anger and my grief were luxuries I couldn't afford. Wallowing in it was exactly what they would expect me to do. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. "The world will give you nothing, so you better learn how to build things for yourself." I had nothing, so I had to build. That afternoon, I walked into an Air Force recruitment office. It was the most radical thing I could think of. My family valued shortcuts, easy money, and appearances. I would choose discipline, merit, and substance. The recruiter was surprised by my test scores and my quiet determination. A month later, I was in basic training. For the next 10 years, the Air Force became my home, my school, and my forge. The grueling physical training and rigid discipline stripped away the insecure girl I had been and replaced her with a woman who understood logistics, strategy, and chain of command. I didn't just follow orders, I learned how to lead. I took advantage of the GI Bill, earning a degree in finance and supply chain management. I rose through the ranks, eventually becoming an officer overseeing multi-million-dollar logistics contracts. The anger I held for my family never went away. It simply changed. It became fuel. Every promotion, every commendation, every successful mission was a silent act of defiance. I was building a life they couldn't touch, a career they couldn't comprehend, and a net worth they would never know about. I was a ghost to them. For 10 years, there was complete silence. Then, 6 months ago, I got an email. It was from my mother. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the past. It was a long, rambling message about how Kevin had been the victim of a bad economy and untrustworthy business partners. The money was gone. All of it, and then some. They were in debt. My father was nearing retirement with nothing saved. They might lose the house. The email ended with a simple, audacious question. We were wondering if you might be in a position to help us out. Just until we get back on our feet. I read the email once, then a second time. I felt no pity. All I felt was the cold, satisfying click of a key turning in a lock. My plan was finally beginning. I replied to my mother's email with a single sentence. I have some leave saved up. I'll be in town next month, and we can talk. The 2 weeks leading up to my trip were spent preparing. I wasn't just going home for a visit. I was deploying on a mission. I rented a modest sedan, booked a room at a nondescript hotel, and packed a civilian wardrobe that screamed stable but not successful. The goal was to appear exactly as they imagined me, a boring government employee with a steady paycheck and good credit, someone they could still manipulate. When I walked into my childhood home, it was like stepping into a time capsule of dysfunction. The house was the same, but the people were worn down. My father's hair was grayer. His shoulders slumped with a weight he never had to carry before. My mother's smile was brittle, stretched thin over a face etched with anxiety. And Kevin was the most changed of all. The swagger was gone, replaced by a twitchy, desperate energy. The golden boy had tarnished. They sat me down at the same dining room table where they had stolen my future 10 years earlier. This time, they didn't have the leverage of my youth. They had only their desperation. They spun a tale of woe, a symphony of bad luck and betrayal. Kevin's genius had been thwarted by a bad economy, by jealous partners, by unforeseen market forces, by everything and everyone but himself. Now, they were on the verge of losing it all. But, my mother said, her eyes gleaming with that old, familiar manipulative light, Kevin had one more brilliant idea. A new venture, guaranteed to succeed. All he needed was a business loan, and all the bank needed was a cosigner. This is your chance, Kevin said, leaning forward, his voice a low, urgent plea. This is your chance to finally be a real part of this family's success. We'll even cut you in for a small percentage. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I looked at them with a calm, practiced neutrality. That's a big decision, I said. My job has taught me to be very careful with finances. I'd need to see everything, the full business plan, your current financials, bank statements, everything. I need to do my due diligence. Their faces lit up. They saw my request not as a hurdle, but as a sign of my serious consideration. They thought my meticulousness was a charming little quirk from my boring job. They had no idea they were about to willingly hand me all the evidence I needed to destroy them. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived at my hotel. As I spread the documents across the desk, I saw it wasn't just a story of incompetence and debt. It was a story of fraud, illegal loans, and, most interestingly, a very suspicious insurance claim from a warehouse fire 2 towns over. My revenge was no longer just about money. It was about justice. The paperwork was a map of their desperation. Kevin had been taking out high-interest loans from predatory lenders. He owed dangerous people a lot of money. The warehouse fire wasn't just suspicious, it was his Hail Mary. He was listed as a security consultant for the small company that owned it, a position he'd held for only a month. The insurance payout was just over $150,000, enough to clear his debts and start over. With a few clicks and a payment to a discreet private investigator, I got the full picture. The fire had been ruled arson, but the case was cold, with no suspects. The most damning piece of evidence, however, wasn't in the official reports. It was a small, recurring payment from my brother's account to Mr. Henderson, my neighbor. It all snapped into place. Kevin needed an alibi for the night of the fire. My mother, in her infinite cruelty, had come up with a brilliant plan. They would pay Mr. Henderson to file a series of escalating noise complaints against me. It would serve two purposes. First, it would establish a record that Kevin was at home, being disturbed by his noisy sister. Second, it was a chance to punish me, to make my life miserable, to put me under the microscope of law enforcement and discredit me should I ever get suspicious. They used their hate for me to cover his crime. My path was clear. I made a detailed, anonymous phone call to the lead arson investigator, suggesting he look into the company's recent consultants and cross-reference their alibis with traffic camera footage on the highways between our town and the warehouse. I knew what they would find. Then, I called my mother. "I've reviewed the financials," I said, my voice even. "We should meet tonight to finalize things." I sat them down at that same dining room table for the third and final time. Kevin was practically vibrating with anticipation, my parents looking at me like I was a winning lottery ticket. I didn't say a word. I simply slid a single sheet of paper into the center of the table. It was a satellite photo of the burned-out warehouse. Kevin froze. My mother's smile faltered. My father just looked confused. "What is this?" he asked. "That," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel, "is your son's real business plan." As I watched the blood drain from Kevin's face, a profound sense of calm washed over me. I knew exactly what was happening at that very moment across the street. I knew the police were at Mr. Henderson's door, asking him to explain how he could have been disturbed by noise from my house while his car was being photographed 2 towns over, right next to the scene of a federal crime. The clever little lie they built to hurt me was the very thing that was about to bring them to justice. Kevin started stammering, a pathetic string of denials that quickly crumbled into panicked sobs. My mother, however, snapped into a familiar mode. Her eyes narrowed, and the fear was instantly replaced by venom. "How could you?" she hissed, her voice low and trembling with rage. "After everything we've done for you, you do this? You were always a selfish, ungrateful child. You're trying to destroy this family." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You're wrong," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "You destroyed this family a long time ago. You did it right here at this table when you taught me that my only value was what I could sacrifice for him." I pointed a finger at my weeping brother. "You didn't raise a son and a daughter. You raised a king and a servant. I just decided I was done polishing the crown." As if on cue, the familiar dance of red and blue lights filled the windows once again. This time, they were pulling into our driveway. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the house. My father, who had been sitting in stunned silence, finally seemed to understand. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror that was 10 years too late. Mr. Henderson, to no one's surprise, had folded like a cheap suit. Faced with the threat of being an accessory to a felony, he told the police everything. About the money, about Kevin's instructions, about my mother's gleeful encouragement. When the police led Kevin out of the house in handcuffs, half the neighborhood was on their lawns, watching the downfall of the golden boy. My mother was taken in for questioning as well. Her petty scheme to harass me had made her an accomplice. The legal process was swift. Kevin was convicted of arson and insurance fraud. My mother, to avoid a harsher sentence, pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstruction of justice. They had to sell the house, the monument to their middle-class pride, to pay for their legal fees. Everything they had built their lives around was gone. A week before I left town for good, I received a letter from my mother. It was filled with blame, excuses, and self-pity. There was not one word of apology. She ended it by writing, "I hope you're happy. You have finally left us with nothing." I never wrote back. But I knew my answer. I wasn't happy. Happiness wasn't the goal. The goal was peace. The goal was justice. By exposing them, I wasn't leaving them with nothing. I was simply forcing them to finally live with the consequences of their own choices, something I had been doing my entire life. Driving out of my old hometown, I didn't look back. The past was no longer a weight, but a lesson. My grandfather taught me to build things for myself, and I had. I had built a new life, a new future, and finally, a profound and unshakable sense of my own worth. I was free.